Oh my gosh, they're both barcodes. Thank you guys so much. Really appreciate the Korean players. Oh, and so much Korean happening right now. I cannot translate that fast. Top left, we have herO. Bottom right, it is INnoVation. That's right, INnoVation. The guy who left for military about 2 years ago expressed disinterest in coming back from the get-go. From basically the point in which he said he had to go to the military. People said, "You're gonna come back?" And he said, "Probably not." Meh. Being the super emotional person we know that he is. And then they asked him, I think during military, and he said, "Nah, probably not." And then they asked him after he got back from military, and he said, "No, I really don't have any interest in it." And then Stats said he changed his mind. Don't listen to him. And then he started playing and stuff. So, INnoVation, you silly goose. You silly. But he is playing somewhat consistently in the Korean tournaments. This replay pack being from the Korean StarCraft weekly KSL, but not the Brood War KSL, the StarCraft 2 KSL. Anyways, it happens Monday, I want to say. Really cool endeavor by 2 community members and then funded by the rest of the community. They have a decent amount of money going out to the winners of this tournament. Brood War also had KSL. Someone's asking, wasn't Brood War ASL? The Korean StarCraft League for Brood War was a project actually by Blizzard. In fact, speaking of Diablo 4, the guy, oh boy, I forget his name, I'm sorry. One of their managers, now heavily working on Diablo 4, was the one who energetically explained to me how he was working on this KSL project because he loved Brood War years ago. And there's like a random chance meeting when I was stuck in Burbank. Adam? What's his online handle, though? Before I go into that story too much further, I do want to mention that herO did make a zealot and send it across the map. INnoVation, last time he was playing StarCraft 2 seriously for reals, it was about 2 years ago. Now, he's probably been paying attention a little bit more than he lets on, probably as well. And probably even played a couple of casual games. I mean, even if you truly are the biggest of Brood War elitists and you really do believe everyone who plays StarCraft 2 secretly only loves Brood War, you gotta admit that someone who devotes that much time of their life to something probably enjoys it to some certain extent. So what I'm trying to say is INnoVation probably is wary of the way that herO plays, because it hasn't really changed, but also of the metas and the builds that have popped up. Maybe not to a really intimate level, as his ranking on the ladder is certainly not as high as it once was, but certainly to some degree. But he is mostly, I would guess, resting on his old skills, not really putting in hours and hours and hours and hours developing, you know, new ones and ones that are going to match a guy like herO, who at this point in time is the world's best Protoss. So what I'm saying is also that INnoVation is a fair underdog going into this. I wanted to see what INnoVation looked like, though, and INnoVation was one of my favorite players for a long time. So I'm still happy about it, but herO should dominate. Henley's dropping in the natural. I think INnoVation was probably going to try and be a little clever about it. You know, the expectations to go into the main. Maybe the Adepts would have been there. They were not. They actually did take down one of the Henlians, so no more one-shotting the probes. Medevac flies away with 2 Henlians left over, and they could sneak by and kill some probes later on. No shield battery to stop that from happening, but most of the severe potential damage has been taken care of. Raven pops out, take care of an observer, and so far everything looks rather settled, standard. You know, INnoVation playing a bit safe with that high ground command center, but who wouldn't against a guy like herO? herO going for something very interesting build order wise. He went for a robo opening into a war prism, which seems to be a little more popular than it ever once was. I mean, if it was a year ago, I'd say this is crazy town. But even then, when herO came back from his military service, he was very much willing to experiment with things that were out of the ordinary. So his real problem coming back was his over-eagerness to take engagements. He didn't quite have that game sense that he did when he was playing nonstop, but he still kind of acted like he did, resulting in some very unfortunate misplays. But he's fixed that up. Again, best Protoss in the world versus old man, you know, just recently got out of the military. I don't think herO is necessarily silent on him, but does probably feel very confident against them. So he's going into a Robo Opener, Fastish Forge for +1 armor. Just, you know, that Robo and a Forge, not a super common opener. And then in a Charge and a Templar Archives. So possibly in a Storm. Yeah, the story of is Pez Raider. Yeah, that's what it was. It was just so funny because I met him like 6 years ago when I lost my voice. I actually could not even really speak to him. So he didn't recognize me because I look different, you know, when I'm on camera. And he didn't recognize my voice because he couldn't hear it. And we're talking about StarCraft. And he's like, oh my god, you're that person. And then he starts excitedly talking to me about how he's setting up this league by Blizzard in Korea because he, you know, grew up with Brood War and he loves it and he loves StarCraft too. And that worked out for a few years actually. It was fairly successful. Back when, you know, Remastered was kind of first came out. Yeah. Hasn't been a Brood War thing for a couple of years at this point. Little medevac drop here. Leading the charge. It's actually a very ragtag little push out by the Terran. I guess he was going to maybe drop with an auto turret and then some units at the front. That was actually, or maybe trying to catch the War Prism. Maybe that was it, actually. Trying to get Influence Matrix, auto turret, Marines in there too. Boost after it. I don't know, but now it looks a little bit more like an expected army. Great feedbacks coming out from the War Prism. Storm is over halfway done. And are there High Templars back at home gaining energy? Not so much. So he did just use potential storms to get those feedbacks. Now, generally, feedback in the Raven is considered pretty damn good. And it still is, of course, here, but I don't know. A lack of storm would be a little concerning if it wasn't herO and I trusted him, I guess. Looks like that scan that told INnoVation he can't really push in. The shield by overcharge would certainly be a problem. No doubt about that, but the rest of the army without a storm wasn't all that impressive. I think it was probably more impressive than it looked, just when you consider that INnoVation would not have been able to focus fire down every unit he would have wanted to. He would have had to have been very wary of storms being in the pocket of the War Prism. He doesn't know that there weren't any more storms, so yeah, that makes sense that he pulled back. I gotta say, his macros keeping up, his decision-making seems fine. He is almost catching herO off guard, so this War Prism now without shields. Low on health as well. If it goes by a Widowmine, definitely dies. And he just got a storm. Again, very limited number of storms. It's so funny, though, because it almost feels like herO is playing on the Terran's expectation. A Terran has to believe that once Storm is out and the other pro gamer is ferrying around a War Prism, that there are storms. I think that's literally what you have to believe. If you see a High Templar alone, not turning into an Archon, you gotta assume it has Storm. Maybe if there's only one and you have a Raven, then I guess you could default take it to feedback. If you see more than one, 100% you think there's Storm. So I feel like that is exactly what's actually one of the problems. So that maybe INnoVation could have been a little more aggressive and ambitious if he had known for a fact there was not going to be any surprise storms, any surprise splash, or a number of storms. Suddenly 4 just killing his entire army, right? But if his main worry were the storms and the Archons, he has not been particularly ambitious about getting to ghosts. He does have a very good army. Widowmines planted down, about to pop off on these Zealots, but also get a bit of the front line of the bio, and here are those storms. As soon as the army retreated back, as herO saw that exactly play out the way that it did in his mind's eye, he hit those storms pretty darn well, but now the Stalkers are a little vulnerable. The Archons and the Immortals got to turn their heads, start taking down these Marauders, and that's exactly what they begin to do. Be extra confident there's on the Warpin, and there it is. More Stalkers coming in. War Prism still available. Very few units on the defensive. INnoVation's other units went for a bit of a counterattack. Looks like they are doing some damage, but not the equivalent to this. The SCVs having to be pulled. So many already were. So now we're at 20 plus SCVs killed. Immortal's going to be juggled on the Warp Prism, no doubt, at this point. There you have it. And, yeah, INnoVation not going to stand up very much longer. He's lost way too much, even as he finally digs into the probe count of his opponent. Starting into a little bit of a base trade, but it just started so much later for INnoVation. And the 4 Immortals with a Warp Prism available are basically perfect against what is currently happening. If those Immortals weren't in play, if this was 8 Stalkers instead, or even 5 Stalkers, 6 Zealots, you know, there's a lot more to be played around with Marauders and Slow and Sim City. But, you know, where Immortals might look a little lackluster if you're against 20 Marines and 10 Marauders, the Marines take all those shots. It's not very effective. They are perfect if they can just free fire on the only thing that they're perfectly designed against, the Marauder. Don't even have to focus fire at that point. GG, herO will win game number 1, but that was close. I will say that actually I was expecting a bit of a bop. And while the end supplies certainly look like more of a bop, I would say that that really could have gone differently. There are moments for INnoVation, and even with his defense losing him the game, I would say that if his other units actually had stayed at home, or if he had, I think maybe just, yeah, dodged those storms a little bit better while pulling the SCVs too. Like, especially the SCVs were pulled more in a tanking manner. They were kind of pulled into the Archons on the left, and then the army was on the right. I think things could have been different. Of course, I'm not saying INnoVation would have won. I think herO still would have pulled more ambitious micro and ambitious aggression out and then eventually won the game, but I wouldn't say that was a stomp. So that's nice to see. But yeah, herO does take game 1. I asked ChatGPT what it thinks of Twitch streamer ZombieGrub. ChatGPT likes me. Do I have an account named Paprika? I do. Game number 2 here. As of course they're on opposite sides. In the bottom left, we have the blue Protoss herO. And in the top right, we have the red Terran INnoVation. Like I said, I think INnoVation showed some of his old form. I think what would have been different if he was not just in the military for, is it 16 months now? 18 months? It is less than 2 years at this point, but I'm not sure exactly what. He probably would have been a little more ambitious about that first engagement, I think. I totally understand why he wasn't, all those points that I mentioned. You don't know where they're coming in from with those storms, if they have the storms, if they have a back attack set up by charge lots. And breaking through the Immortals and the Archon with a shield body overcharge was going to be extremely difficult, but I still think he might have positioned himself and almost taunted the Protoss a little bit more. Instead of just kind of backing away and seemingly admitting that he couldn't do much without, I don't know, being 100% factual. Like, this is 100% also, by the way, where if he was full-time pro gamer for the last few years, I would not be questioning. The only reason I'm even throwing in, like, I think he might have been able to, oh, his herO loses his probe, is because he is a little out of shape. And then I'm sure there were some macro mistakes that old INnoVation wouldn't be making. At this point, I would say, or I should say at the point at which INnoVation retired, I'm not sure he was literally the best macro player ever. I can't really remember what was happening at that time. COVID just did all types of things to us, right? And the scale of the other players was already reaching to a point where it was legitimately difficult to tell. INnoVation back in like 2015, 2016, I don't think there was really an argument. He was the best macro player, but had other faults. And then we had that kind of classic 4 horsemen of Terran, best macro, best micro, best strategy, best decision-making or build orders, kind of with the TY. Anyways, so I think INnoVation would still be one of the best macro players. His macro would still be very, very good. And he'd still fall along the metas, because he had to. He also went through the phases where Terrans had to proxy versus Protoss. It's not that he couldn't do that. But I don't think, one, that he's as good as he was at that point, right? He's kind of getting back into StarCraft 2. Or two, that would, the best macro in the world would actually push him that much farther above his opponents. Again, at his highlight, the highlight of his career, you could just tell that he was macroing better than anyone else would. And the Zergs were getting steamrolled. Now, I don't think that's really going to be true. I think he's going to be basically good. And, you know, on par with a lot of the other Terrans that we have. But we'll see. Sometimes players do come back from the military and they have a different style to play, or different strengths, different weaknesses. Of course, many of them do come back and they just never get anywhere close to their old form in any fashion. Don't get close to their micro, close to their macro, close to their decision-making. Which is usually more the case. Very rare do you have a herO. That's why we talk so highly of him, who's trying to out-micro this Widowmine, by the way. Not quite working yet. Is that he did come back to the military and very quickly got to a point where he was a championship contender again. Did he forget about the Widowmine? That third adept just shaded into the exact wrong place. He just must have miscalculated the shade and where it would end. So very awkward. Already 2 adepts was a bit of a tell. It's a Stargate opener. 3 certainly would have. These 2 adepts not finding much success. 3 one-shot and SCV, not 2. And that was, yeah, really not successful at all. Reaper also got a scout and saw it was a Stargate, so very much should be expecting the Phoenix. He did get a Cyclone that was shown to the adept, but then he still got a medevac. And this is not uncommon for Korean players in general, but I would say if you think along the logic here, it's not supposed to make much sense. It's a bit of a gamble. If the Widowmine drop, or Cyclone drop in this case, went the wrong direction, it could be intercepted by the Phoenix. But it looks like he's using it just to add mobility and try and catch a unit off guard. Phoenix, however, are the ones that ultimately get the jump on the opponent, although one got shot by a Widowmine by the looks of it. That's a lot of damage on that. And herO did see there was no add-on to the tech lab to the starport while his adept was in there, so now he knows it's a medevac. Could have been Liberator. Could have been a Viking. Very much could have been a Viking. Which would eventually come out. But now with the medevac also seen, and of course all the Marines trailing behind it, so you get the idea. You get that the Terran player was setting up for a little more of an aggressive attack than just sitting back on their heels trying to defend against the Phoenix, which can be a real swap of the scenario. Some Protoss players do expect the Terran to just be like, oh, okay, fair game, okay, I guess you control this portion of the early game. And some, well, do exactly what INnoVation's doing, trying to take advantage of the low direct fighting unit number that a Protoss has in the situation. Mortal comes out, helps to stop this, however, especially as it is in range of the shield battery overcharge. That was super important right there. And the Phoenix come back to mop everything else up, or at least try to. Enough Marines left over, and a reinforcing tank will end up securing INnoVation's retreats, which is something. Actually, not too bad. In fact, it could have been way worse, because the worst thing about dealing with Phoenix, when you do try to be aggressive against them, is that they are excellent at punishing you. Or maybe a Stalker player would be a little less prone to following up, depending on, I guess, how many units are left over. A Charge Lot player would just be running across the field still, right? A little slower than the Phoenix. The Phoenix, they take out the medevacs, they pick up any units that are trailing, and they do immediately start kind of doing their own like little counter attack, right? They pick off all those units and then they look for openings in the SCV line or on the production line. Now, I would say most Protoss players wouldn't do this. Phoenix went across the map? Sure. Take advantage of the situation? Sure. Send the rest of your units across? Not as much. Couple of sentries, couple of blinkless stalkers, a single immortal, a single charge lot. I mean, this is a motley crew, yes? This is a weird one. The Zealot could tank. The force fields could stop the tanks from being repaired, or a bunker from being repaired, but the Phoenix has no bunker. Or the Phoenix would just loot the tanks, of course. But then the amount of Marines now is kind of intimidating. I don't think they can beat the number of Marines, even though they're not... Oh, a Colossus is here. Oh, well, that changes things. Colossus is here. Now, if everything's perfect... Didn't even need the force field stop to repair. The SCVs came in to try and actually be included in the army fight and just realized they weren't going to help at all. Wow. herO. I mean, this is the type of thing that herO would do, and not many other Protosses. Even though you watch it unfold and you're like, no, that made sense. It still didn't feel like it was supposed to be done. INnoVation gonna lose access to his natural, access to his SCVs, access to saving his command center and his third CC as well. Oh, no, okay, loses the natural. Yeah, that might be it. He unloads his army on the other side to try and get us around. This is even before Stim. Wiser of herO to evacuate, of course, so he recalls out of there and now has a substantial lead. 3 bases to 2, 62 probes, 33 workers. Can't really blame INnoVation for thinking that 2 tanks sieged up like that was going to be good enough against, again, established. When they go for Phoenix, they're not going to have a very big ground army. That's just how it works. Phoenix is too expensive, oftentimes covering something. If they are going to attack into you, it's because they went into charge lots, which INnoVation saw was not the case, I think, with the Robo pumping out an Immortal, right? So that just like wasn't kind of what was supposed to happen. But hindsight 2020, had he had 1 tank here, another tank up here, that already would have been different because at least this tank, it would have been lifted, but it wouldn't have died. And then perhaps it still would have been too much, of course, but yeah, you just don't expect that type of thing to happen. If he knew it was on the way, he could have scouted ahead a little bit more so the tanks fired as soon as possible, as opposed to when their sight finally came into effect. Yeah, just all the types of would've, could've, should'ves. But as it is, INnoVation knows he has to get some really major damage done with mostly Marines against someone who has gone into 3 Colossus. Unless herO makes a massive mistake, that ain't happening. He could lose even his entire mineral line in the main, that still would not be enough. There's 3 Colossus stand on their own. Here comes the rest of the army. Can't leave, because the Phoenix is going to take on your medevacs, and oh, this might just be when INnoVation taps out. There's really not a leg to stand on. A couple of Marauders come over here, but even then, they could be picked up. Shield Battery could save the Nexus. Trying to find herO out of position, overconfidently moving his entire army in one direction or another. It can happen even to the best of players, but even though it kind of happened, herO was out of position for a second there. He wasn't enough out of position. And there you have it, GG. All right, a 2-0 for herO. The expected outcome, no surprise there. herO's been playing this game for the last couple of years as the highest ranked Protoss in a lot of tournaments. INnoVation, he only recently came back. You know, you got to give him a break. But some of the old INnoVation was there, for sure. That was not nearly as bad as it could have been, in my opinion. If I had gone into this replay and seen